The last scream before silence. The city was burning. Alien buildings, tall and glowing, cracked under the heat. Black smoke rose into the sky. Sirens wailed. The streets were full of screams. Mothers carried their children and ran. Fathers searched for lost sons. Soldiers dropped their weapons and fled. In the center of the city stood the great tower of Solhar, once shining, now broken. The invaders had arrived hours ago. Tall creatures with metal skin and red eyes. No one knew their name. No one knew their reason. They just came and killed. No one could stop them. Not the city guards. Not the generals. Not the warlords. No one. The leaders of the alien city begged for mercy. They sent messages to the stars. They offered gold, fuel, even prisoners. But no one answered. Only silence came. The screams grew louder. Fire danced across rooftops. The sky turned red. And then, everything went quiet. No one noticed it at first, but slowly, one by one, even the invaders stopped moving. The children stopped crying. The fire still burned, but the air felt heavy. A shape walked through the flames. Tall, slow, calm, a human. He wore no armor, just an old, dust-covered coat. His hands were empty, his face was quiet, but his eyes were not like others. The aliens watching from the shadows felt something strange, not fear, not hate, something older, something deeper. One old alien priest whispered, "He has returned." A group of invaders saw him. They laughed. One of them stepped forward and raised a weapon. "Stop!" shouted a commander. "Do not touch him." Too late. The invader fired. The shot hit the human straight in the chest and nothing happened. The fire kept burning around him. The ground cracked beneath him. But the human kept walking, step by step. No anger, no rush. He walked, like he had done this before, like he belonged to the fire. The invaders panicked. They fired again, again, again. But the human did not fall. The alien civilians watched from behind broken walls and glass windows. They remembered the old stories their grandparents told them, stories of a human who once lived among them, stories of betrayal and of wrath. "It cannot be him," one alien whispered, but the others knew. It was him, the one they left behind, the one they lied to, the one they forgot. The human stopped near the ruins of the great tower. The wind blew ash around him like snow. His coat fluttered, and for a second it looked like he was glowing from the inside. An invader leader stepped forward, taller than the others. His voice was like thunder. "What are you?" he asked. The human looked at him, slowly, with no emotion. "You heard their screams?" the human said. "You gave them fire," the leader growled. "They are weak." They begged. They cried. The human nodded. "Yes." He turned his head. Behind him, a small alien girl stood among the rubble, shivering. He walked to her. She looked up at him, her eyes full of tears. "Blood on her arm," she whispered. "Are you going to hurt me too?" The human knelt down. His voice was soft now. "No." He took off his coat and wrapped it around her. His hands were warm. She asked, "Who are you?" He looked toward the sky, the fire above, the death around. "No one," he said. "Just someone who remembers." He stood again. The invaders raised their weapons. "You will burn," they shouted. But the human only walked forward, toward them, through the fire. The invaders screamed, but not from pain, from fear. They fired. The human disappeared into the blaze. And then silence. No sound, no breath. Just the slow fall of ash. Some say the fire died that day. Some say the human became it. But the little alien girl, the one he saved, she remembers. Every night when the city sleeps, she tells the story to those who will listen. She calls it the last scream before silence. The fire does not burn him. The fire should have burned him, but it didn't. The flames wrapped around the human like a blanket, but he walked through them untouched. The alien invaders stood frozen, their weapons shaking in their hands. They had never seen this before. They had crushed planets, burned cities, made kings fall on their knees, but this man, this human, he walked through fire like it was air. The ground cracked under his feet. Buildings groaned as they collapsed. Screams echoed in the distance, but he didn't flinch. Not even once. A commander of the invaders shouted, "He's using a shield, break it!" 3 elite soldiers rushed him with glowing spears. They never made it. A gust of heat exploded from the human's body. Not like fire, but like memory, like pain, like 1,000 voices screaming at once. The air shimmered and the soldiers dropped to their knees. Their weapons turned to ash. They cried out, not from wounds, but from something else, from something they saw in him. Memories, ancient and raw, of battles lost, of dying stars, of a ship buried beneath ice, of a promise broken in this very city. The human kept walking, step by step, toward the enemy base now. Behind him, the little alien girl followed. She had no reason to trust him, but her legs moved on their own, like they knew he was the only safe thing in a world gone mad. She held his coat around her shoulders. It still smelled like ash and something old. Like time, she whispered. They said you were a monster. He didn't stop walking. She asked, "Are you?" The human looked at her. His voice was soft. Not yet. Deep inside the enemy base, alien generals watched the screen. One of them, a red-eyed giant, slammed his fist on the table. "Why is he not dead?" Another one trembled. "He's human." The others laughed, but the first one didn't. He leaned closer to the screen. "You don't understand. This one, he's not just human. He's that human." Silence filled the room. Outside, the soldiers were retreating. The ones who stayed were turning mad, crying, some even begging to be taken prisoner, just to get away from him. "What's he doing?" the general asked. On the screen, the human reached the wall of the base. He placed one hand on the steel gate, and it melted. Not with fire, but like it was ash remembering the sun. He stepped inside. The human walked past rows of machines, weapons, and prisoners. He didn't look around. His eyes were set on something deeper, something buried. The little girl still followed, afraid to let go. They reached a dark chamber, sealed by 10 layers of alien tech. The human stopped. He said quietly, "They buried it here." The girl asked, "What is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he placed his palm on the final door. Symbols lit up. Strange ones. Not alien, not human. Something older. Something the invaders had found, but never understood. The door opened, and the room inside was quiet, cold, filled with nothing but dust, and in the center, a stone, a single gray stone with names carved into it. Human names, dozens of them. Beneath the names, one single word: forgotten. The human stepped forward and dropped to one knee. His hands trembled. For the first time, the fire in his eyes faded. He whispered their names, one by one. The little girl watched in silence. Tears fell down his face. Silent. Burning. He looked up and said, "I left them here." The invaders arrived, dozens of them. They filled the room, surrounded him. Their leader stepped forward, his armor glowing red. He said, "You were supposed to die with them." The human stood slowly, no anger in his face, just sadness. "I did," he replied. The leader snarled, "Then why are you here?" The human stepped aside and pointed at the girl. Because she didn't scream. The invaders looked at her, confused. "She didn't scream," he repeated. "She didn't run. She stood in the fire and waited. The human looked at them all, and suddenly, the air grew still, not with fear, but with judgment. His voice dropped. Lopo, you taught your children to fear humans, to mock us, to erase us from your history. He pointed to the stone behind him. But we remember. Even in death. A deep hum filled the chamber. The names on the stone began to glow. The invaders stepped back. The leader shouted, "Stop him!" But no one moved. They couldn't. Their legs shook. Their weapons slipped from their hands. The human didn't raise a finger. He didn't need to. Because behind him, in the shadows, figures began to rise, not ghosts, not illusions, but something older, tall, silent. Human forms made of fire and ash and sorrow. They walked beside him. No armor, no words, just purpose. The human turned to the girl. "Stay behind me." She nodded. He faced the invaders, his voice like thunder now. "You gave them fire. Now, you will feel ours." The oath they broke long ago before the city burned, before the invaders came, before the human became a legend. There was a promise, a sacred oath. They called it the Pact of Silence. It was not written on paper. It was spoken in whispers, sealed in blood and buried under the earth. The aliens of Solhar had made that pact with a small group of humans, survivors of a forgotten war, soldiers who crash-landed on this alien world. They were weak then, broken, dying, and the aliens took them in, fed them, healed them, gave them homes. But in return, the humans gave their word. They would protect Solhar if it ever faced destruction. They would be the last defense, the hidden fire. But time passed, and lies grew. The aliens began to fear the humans. They saw their strength, their silence, their eyes that remembered too much. And so one night, without warning, they broke the pact. They poisoned the food. They sent guards in the dark. They called it cleansing, and they killed them, all, or so they thought. Now fire danced across Solhar again. The human, the one they thought was dead, stood before the invaders. Behind him the shadows of fallen warriors moved. Not alive, not dead. Something in between. The alien leaders watching from high towers shook with fear. They remembered the stories. One of them whispered, "He was the last." Another replied, "No, he was the strongest." The little alien girl stood beside the human. Her tiny hand gripped his coat. She looked up at him and asked, "What was this place?" The human's eyes stared at the names on the stone wall, the names of those who died for Solhar. "A promise," he said. "One they broke." The invader commander, face twisted in pride, stepped forward and shouted, "You are alone!" Human didn't answer. He simply raised his hand and pointed to the walls, and the walls began to whisper. Soft voices, inhuman, ancient. They spoke of betrayal, of blood spilled in secret, of weapons hidden under schools, of the night the soldiers begged to be spared and were silenced with knives. Alien civilians watching from the shadows began to cry. They had never heard this. They had never been told. And now, the truth poured out of the stone. The human turned his head slowly and looked directly at the commander. "You didn't just kill us," he said. "You made the children believe we never existed." The invaders attacked, this time with everything: missiles, drones, gravity weapons, sonic screams. The room shook. The stone cracked, but the human didn't move. His shadow stretched behind him and grew larger, and when the smoke cleared, he was still there. Not a scratch. Around him the air was rippling, and behind him those figures of flame had changed. They now had faces. The faces of the soldiers who died in the betrayal. One of them whispered, "We waited." Another said, "We dreamed of fire." They didn't speak for revenge, they spoke for justice. The human looked at them, then looked at the invaders. His voice was low, but it echoed in every building of the city. "You broke your oath." The ground cracked. You silenced the truth. The towers above began to tilt. You made my people shadows. The sky turned black. Then he said 5 words. Now feel what we became. Across the city, strange things began to happen. Doors opened without touch. Lights flickered and died. Water turned to steam. And everywhere, the symbols of the old pact, hidden for centuries, started to glow. Children found strange marks on their walls. Mothers felt warmth in the earth. Old priests screamed as visions came flooding back. Visions of the night they helped the leaders erase the humans. The city was remembering, and it was angry. In the middle of the chaos, a young alien officer dropped to his knees. His father had told him stories of the humans, but he never believed them. Now he saw the truth with his own eyes. He looked up at the human and did something no one expected. He bowed, deep. The commanders shouted, "Traitor!" But others joined him. One by one, alien soldiers, citizens, young, old. They bowed, not out of fear, but out of shame. The invaders still held their weapons, but their hands were shaking. The human said nothing. He simply raised his hand and pointed to the invader commander, the one who led the attack. The shadows behind him moved forward. The commander tried to run, but the shadows didn't chase him. They passed through him, and he screamed, not from pain, but from memory. He dropped to the floor, eyes wide, whispering names he had never heard before, the names on the stone. He saw what they saw, felt what they felt, and it broke him. The human walked away. The little girl followed. The fire burned on, but it no longer spread. It now stood still, like a wall guarding him. Behind him the voices whispered, "He came for mercy, but now he walks for memory." The storm beneath his skin. No one knew what the human really was. Not the invaders. Not the aliens who betrayed him. Not even the girl who followed him now, step by step, holding tightly to his coat like it was the only solid thing in a world falling apart. But the ground knew, the sky knew, and the old stones of Solhar remembered, because there was a storm, hidden deep inside him, and it was waking up. The human walked through the broken city. Fire still burned in the distance. Shadows of the past whispered behind him, and in the air, something had changed. The silence was too deep, too sharp. Tiu was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before thunder. The alien girl looked up at him. "What's inside you?" she asked softly. The human did not answer. His eyes stared forward. Dark, endless, like 2 stars that had died long ago but still sent their light. His steps made no sound now, as if the ground itself didn't dare resist him. Far above, in the black towers of the enemy fleet, the highest commander stood frozen. He watched the screens. He saw what was coming, and he felt it. Not with his eyes, but with his bones. "He's not just a man," the commander said. "He's the storm they warned us about." His advisor trembled. "What storm?" The commander's voice dropped to a whisper. "The one Earth buried. Years ago, long before this war, deep inside a hidden lab on a dead moon. A weapon had been made, not a machine, not a bomb, but a human. Grown in silence, forged in pain, trained to carry a storm. But when the war ended, Earth feared what they had created, so they sealed him away, in a crashed ship, on a forgotten world, and left him, to sleep. But fate and betrayal woke him, and now he was walking. The human stopped at the center of the city. It was once a place of celebration, a garden of music and stars. Now it was a graveyard of metal. The girl asked again, "What are you?" He knelt beside her, touched her forehead with one finger, and in that second she saw it. Not with eyes, but with soul. A storm, trapped behind walls of skin and bone, not of rain or lightning, but of time, war, memory, and sorrow. A storm made from everything the universe tried to forget. And it lived beneath his skin, waiting, An army of invaders approached. Thousands. Tanks, airships, war beasts. Their machines roared. Their weapons glowed. They believed numbers would win. They didn't understand what they were facing. They still thought he was a soldier, but he wasn't. He was the silence that follows war. He stood slowly. No armor, no shield. Just the storm, waking up. The invaders fired. Missiles, plasma bolts, shock rounds. Everything. But before they could hit him, they stopped, frozen in air, not falling, not moving, just suspended. Like time itself had paused. Then, without warning, the storm cracked open. It didn't roar. It whispered, and that whisper turned the sky black. The clouds spun, wind howled from under the ground. Time bent. Reality screamed, and the soldiers dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, clutching their heads. They were not hurt physically. They were shown something, a memory, not theirs. His. The girl saw it too. She saw a field of bones under a purple sky. She saw stars fall like tears. She saw a man kneeling beside a child's grave, alone, forgotten, and, above him carved into stone, the world moved on. He didn't. The girl gasped. The storm faded. The sky cleared and the human stood still. The air around him was calm again. But it felt like standing next to a black hole, the kind of calm that could swallow you. The invaders were gone. Not dead. Just erased like they had never existed. The city lights returned. The people came out of hiding. Some wept. Some dropped to their knees. But none dared speak. Not until the girl stepped forward and said the words that changed everything. He's not a monster. He's the storm that came to save us. High above, in the orbiting warship, the galactic leaders watched the scene. One of them whispered, "What do we do now?" Another replied, "We pray he never comes for us." The human looked up, at the sky. His voice was quiet, but it reached them all. This was never about revenge. This was about remembering. He walks with the dead. The sky had returned to blue. The city no longer burned. The fire had died. But the people of Solhar did not celebrate, because something else had risen from the ashes. Something older than fear. Something deeper than memory. Was still standing there, the human, silent and still like a mountain waiting for the storm to return. But he was not alone. Not anymore. They were walking behind him, not men, not ghosts, but something in between. The dead. They wore old uniforms. Torn, scorched, some had no faces. Others glowed with a light that came from within. They did not speak. They simply followed him, one by one. Some limped, some drifted like smoke. But all had eyes that never blinked, and they followed only him. The girl held his coat tighter and whispered, "Who are they?" He looked at her gently, his voice quiet but sharp like glass. "They were my brothers. Decades ago, the soldiers of Earth had come to this world in peace, to build, to protect, to keep a promise. But when the betrayal came, when Solhar turned on them, the soldiers fought alone, outnumbered, hunted, left behind, and one by one, they fell. Not all died in battle. Some were executed, some were buried alive, some were erased from the records, but the pact of silence did not forget them, and now they were walking again. In the streets, alien citizens stared in silence as the army of the dead passed by. None of them screamed, none of them ran. Some bowed their heads, some fell to their knees. An old alien priest wept. He looked at the glowing eyes of one dead soldier and said, "I remember you. You saved my child." The soldier didn't speak, but he paused, just long enough to show he remembered too. In the black towers above, the invader leaders were losing control. Their fleets were silent, their commanders unresponsive. Some had dropped their weapons and fled. Others had gone mad from what they saw. One general stabbed himself in the chest, shouting, "They're in my mind! They remember me!" Another screamed, "We didn't know they'd come back." But someone had known. Someone had warned them long ago, a broken message from a dying planet, one line only. If you wake him, you wake them all. In the city square, the human and the dead soldier stopped. He looked around. His eyes scanned every broken wall, every burned tower. He whispered to the wind, "You forgot us." The wind carried his voice across every corner of Solhar. "You erased our names. You buried our bones. You taught your children to hate us." Behind him, the soldiers of the past stood like statues. He said, "But we remembered." Then he raised his hand and pointed to the ground. The earth cracked, the rubble shook, and one by one, more dead rose. Not just from this city, but from deep below, from bunkers, from ruins, from mass graves, and with them came memories. Memories that could not be hidden anymore. Across the city, aliens fell to the ground, clutching their heads. Visions filled their minds. Children saw the night soldiers were burned alive while asking for water. Mothers saw how their leaders laughed as the humans died. Priests saw the lies carved into stone. The truth was louder than fire, and heavier than guilt. The girl cried. "They never told us," she said. "They made us believe you were evil." He looked at her. "They needed a villain," he said, "because they were too afraid to face what they did." The girl wiped her tears. "But you came back to help us." The human didn't answer. He only said, "They didn't." He pointed to the soldiers behind him. "They followed me. Not because they hate, but because they remember." He looked to the sky. "And now they walk with me, until the last name is spoken." From the far side of the planet, a fleet arrived. The real enemy, the architects of war. Not the invaders, not Solhar, but something older, cold, silent, a race that fed on conflict. They watched from their ships, calculating, speaking, without sound. One of them whispered in its hive tongue, "He is the last error, Earth's secret weapon, designed to carry their guilt." Another replied, "And now, he carries their dead." The ships opened fire. Lasers, dark matter, plasma waves. The sky turned red again. But this time, the human didn't shield. He simply walked. And the dead walked with him. They stepped into the fire and did not burn. They raised no weapons. They didn't need to, because the enemy ship stopped midair, froze, then shook, as if something inside them broke, then exploded, but not from outside, from within. The storm had moved into them. Their own machines betrayed them. Their own minds cracked open, because the dead didn't fight with steel. They fought with memory, and memory was poison. When it ended, the sky was clear again. No ships, no enemy, just a broken city, and one man walking with the dead. The girl stepped beside him. "What now?" she asked. He looked around, at the eyes watching from windows, at the children who would never know lies again. "Now," he said, "we walk until no one forgets." And so they walked, out of the city, into the wasteland, with the dead behind them and silence ahead. Not the silence of fear, the silence of truth. The child and the flame. The sun rose over the ashes. Solhar was quiet again, but not at peace. The human walked through the dead land, slow and silent, and behind him came the forgotten, soldiers made of shadow and sorrow. Beside him walked the little girl. Her feet were bare, her face tired, but her eyes, they had changed. They no longer held fear, they held fire. They passed through villages where the people knelt without being told. They passed through broken war camps where invaders had fled, leaving only weapons and empty armor. And everywhere they walked, the world remembered. Because where the human stepped, the ground did not burn. It bloomed. Old trees grew from cracks. Flowers the city had forgotten returned. But it wasn't mercy. It was memory. The girl looked up at the human and said, "They're afraid of me now." He looked at her, calm. "They should be." She didn't understand. Not yet, but she felt it, the warmth inside her chest, the heat that rose every time she walked beside him. Once she had cried in the ruins. Now fire danced in her hands when she slept. Deep underground, the leaders of Solhar met in silence. The council chamber, once full of pride, now smelled of fear. They had watched the girl on every screen. They saw what she was becoming. One of them whispered, "She is the flame now." Another said, "He gave it to her." The oldest among them shook his head. "No, she already had it. He just woke it up." Far away in the ruins of the packed chamber, the place where the humans had once sworn to protect the city, the humans stopped walking. The girl looked around, the broken pillars, the ash-covered floor, the silence that echoed louder than thunder. "What is this place?" she asked. He said nothing at first, then finally spoke. "This is where the world ended." She saw the stone in the center, cracked in two. It had once carried the names of both humans and aliens, a symbol of unity, but one half had been broken, burned and left behind. He knelt in front of it, touched the ash, and it lit up, not with fire, but with memories, screams, laughter, betrayal, tears. Her body shook. So many voices. Too many. She screamed and covered her ears. He placed a hand on her shoulder. The storm calmed. "You carry it now," he said. She looked at her hands, shaking, glowing faintly. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. He nodded. "Neither did we." He told her the truth. She was born of Solhar, but not of its lies. Her blood carried fire, a rare gift, once seen only in the first children of Earth soldiers who were buried here. She was not human, but she was something more. And now, she had to choose. Carry the flame, or let it die. "If I carry it," she asked, "what happens to me?" His voice was quiet. "You will never be safe." She looked at the army of dead behind him, at the silent world watching her. "And if I don't?" He turned his eyes to the horizon. "Then no one else will be." She stood in the middle of the chamber, placed her hands on the broken stone, and the ground shook. Visions filled the sky. Giant clouds formed above, shaped like the faces of the fallen. Alien citizens ran from their homes not in terror but in awe, because for the first time, the names of the dead lit the sky, like stars, and at the center of it all by the little girl. Her feet lifted from the ground, her body glowed, and then she burned, but not in pain, not in death. She became fire, living fire, and from her heart rose a new word, carved in light. "Remember." The human bowed his head. Even the dead soldiers behind him knelt, not to worship, but to honor, because she had chosen to carry the flame, not for power, not for revenge, but to keep the truth alive. In a distant star system, ancient machines stirred. Beings who had long watched from the void felt the shift. "It has begun again," one of them whispered. "A new flame-bearer walks," said another. "And this time," the third added, "she is not alone." The girl returned to the ground, changed, not older, not taller, but heavier, with the weight of memory, of pain, of legacy. She looked at the human. "What now?" He stood. For the first time, he looked tired, like his journey was nearing its end. "Now," he said, "they will come for you." Her eyes didn't blink. "Let them come." From that day on, the people of Solhar no longer told children stories to fear the fire. Instead, they whispered of a girl who held it in her hands, a girl who stood beside the one who walked with the dead, and together, they turned silence into flame. Only a human walked into the fire. The world was quiet again, too quiet. No more warships in the sky, no more fire on the streets. But the silence did not feel like peace. It felt like the space between a heartbeat and a goodbye. The girl stood at the edge of the city, the flame inside her still glowing. It did not burn her anymore. It had become part of her. Breath, blood, memory. Behind her stood thousands, aliens, survivors, soldiers of the past, all waiting, but not for her. They were waiting for him, the human. He was walking alone now, his steps slower than before, his shoulders heavy, his coat dragging through the ash. She called out to him, "Where are you going?" He didn't turn. He only said, "Where it ends, far beyond the city, past the ruins, past the dustlands, there was a place the aliens had forbidden for generations. They called it the Hollow Scar, a place where even sound died, where the sky did not shine, where no one returned. But he did because he had been there once long ago, when he was buried alive with the others, when the city betrayed him, when the flame first woke inside his soul. And now he was going back, not for vengeance, but for release." The girl ran after him. She reached his side and grabbed his arm. "You can't leave now," she said. "They need you." He looked at her gently. "No," he said. "They need you." Her lips trembled. "But I don't know how to lead." "Neither did I," he replied, "until they broke me." As they reached the center of the hollow scar, the sky grew dark, the ground cracked, and from the shadows, they came. Not enemies, not soldiers, but keepers, ancient beings, tall, robed in smoke and bone. Their eyes held stars that had already died. They had no mouths, but their voices echoed inside the soul. They spoke to the girl first. "She burns. She carries the name." They turned to the human. "He walks with the dead. He is not one of them." "Not anymore." She asked. "What do you want?" The keepers replied. "The flame cannot stay with both. It chooses one." The human nodded. "I know," he said. The girl's hands glowed brighter. The fire inside her pulsed. The keepers stepped aside and revealed the altar, a platform of obsidian and light. On it, an ancient machine slept, shaped like a coffin, carved with human names. The last weapon of the pact. Never used, because it needed a soul to activate. A soul full of memory, and pain, and fire. The girl looked at the human. Realization hit her. "You're not coming back," she whispered. He smiled, but it was tired. Not sad, just finished. "Someone has to stay behind," he said. "Someone has to close the gate." The keepers whispered, "He will burn, and then fade." The girl's voice cracked. "No, there must be another way." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "There always is," he said. "But this one is mine." He stepped toward the altar and it opened. Light poured out. The names of the dead lit the air. The soldiers behind them saluted without words. One by one, they faded, returning to dust, to memory, their promise fulfilled, their journey done. The girl shouted, "Wait!" He stopped, turned. She ran into his arms, hugged him tight. The fire inside her passed through him. He felt it, warm, pure, not like the storm inside him. It was hope. New. Unbroken. She cried into his coat. "Don't make me do this alone." He touched her face. "You won't." He placed something in her hand, a small chip. Old, broken, but it still glowed faintly. "This carries my voice," he said. "If they forget again, remind them." He stepped onto the altar. The coffin closed. The machine lit up, and the keepers raised their hands. "He walks into the fire," they said, "so the child may carry the light." The girl fell to her knees. The fire around the altar grew white, so bright the world went blind. And then, silence. Real silence. The kind that wraps the world in peace and the human was gone. In the years that followed, the girl led the rebuilding of Solhar. not as a queen, not as a warrior, but as the flame bearer. She carried memory, truth, forgiveness, and she told the story again and again of the one who walked into the fire alone, not to destroy, but to protect, not to punish, but to remember. In every city, a statue was raised, but it never showed his face, only a coat in the wind and one line carved below. He burned, so we would not forget, and every night before the stars came out, children would sit in circles and ask the same question: what was his name? And the flame bearer would smile. He had many, she would say, but to me, he was the one who walked alone.